In early October 1802, Ludwig van Beethoven was on a rest cure ordered by his doctors. Beethoven was facing an incredible existential crisis. He was facing the fact that he was going deaf. The crisis was so severe that he even considered taking his own life, and we know that because of a letter never sent to his two brothers in which he said the very same thing. He lived for many years after that and composed some of the greatest music the world has ever seen. But I wanted to ask the question, what if Beethoven had never gone deaf? You see, up to this point, Beethoven was very successful. He was a fantastic, incredible virtuoso pianist. He wrote amazing works which were well received. He was seen as an up-and-coming great composer, someone who would carry on the great traditions of Mozart and Haydn. But when he was only in his 20s, he started to notice that he was going deaf, and he started seeing these doctors, and he could see that nothing was working, and he felt that he really needed to do something about this. Up until this point, Beethoven is writing in what we commonly call the early period, and he's about to enter what we call the heroic period, and there's a reason for that. Beethoven had an enormously strong will, an incredible character. Someone had drawn a line in front of him and said, "You shall not pass." He didn't know who it was. He didn't know what force it was. But that line was deafness. And he said no to that. Listen to what he says in this excerpt from that letter he never sent to his brothers. "How could I possibly admit weakness in the one sense which should be more perfect in me than in others, a sense which I once possessed in the greatest perfection, a perfection such as few in my profession have or ever have had? What humiliation for me when someone standing near me heard a flute in the distance and I heard nothing, or someone heard the shepherd singing and again I heard nothing. Such incidents almost brought me to despair. A little more, and I would have ended my life." If Beethoven had actually taken his life, he would still be a famous composer. But think about this. After this letter, after he decided to shake his fist at this force, he entered that heroic period and he wrote some of the greatest works, the most famous works we know, powerful works like the Emperor Piano Concerto, like the Fifth Symphony, like the great middle period piano sonatas, works that showed he was going to fight this thing and he was not going to lose. I believe there are three things that held Beethoven together, that helped him to forge ahead, and that helped him to write the greatest music the world has ever seen, even perhaps greater than had he not gone deaf. Those things were, first of all, his training. We musicians are all trained to hear music in our heads, to see music written down and hear it, but also to hear it in our heads and be able to write it down. He had a very high level ability to do that. The second thing Beethoven had was his creativity. He was a great builder, an architect of huge, powerful structures. He had something to say and nothing was going to hold him back. That creativity had to find a way out. Art had pulled him out of this, and he wasn't going to say no to that. He was going to forge ahead. And the third thing that Beethoven had was an incredible inner strength that helped him to forge through for many more years, through his middle period, his heroic period, into his late period, where he wrote some of the most spiritual music. And here I do want to refute some assertions that people have made, that some of the weirdness or strange elements about the late period were because Beethoven couldn't hear it. And I must emphasize that any trained musician can hear the music in their head. No, he wrote that way because he wanted to. From one perspective, the physical challenge, deafness, won out, because by the time Beethoven was near the end of his life, he was almost completely deaf. But from another point of view, this calamity, something that he feared maybe more than death itself, he overcame. He was victorious. He pushed through for all those years and wrote this great music. I strongly believe that there's a validity to the idea that he needed that challenge. He needed something to push back on him harder than any external force, such as competition with other performers or composers. He needed that challenge, something to say to him, I dare you to step beyond this line, because with that challenge came the greatest music that he could have ever written, and some would argue the greatest music in the world. So I believe, as tragic as it was in one respect for Beethoven, that he was the victor and deafness was the loser, I think that he needed that to write the great music that he did. But I'm curious to see what you think. Would you argue that he would have still written these great works even if he hadn't gone deaf? Let me know in the comments. I think it's a very interesting discussion. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, you can become a member of this channel. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.